Welcome to Free Human, a podcast where we explore the intersection of creativity, self-actualization, and the Dharmic path. I'm Indigo, a Dharma coach, medicine woman, and multidisciplinary artist. I guide humans through the process of remembering their true self so they can live in alignment with their soul. You are art that breathes. Your life is art. It's your intimate relationship with self and the universe. Every feeling, thought, movement, experience, and creation is your art. Your soul is singing a song, and the notes are weaving through the universe. To sing your soul song is to be free. This podcast is the fire circle in my Dharma garden, a place where we share our soul stories and medicine, nurture our curiosity, and weave our prayers into the collective. Thank you for being here. I am very grateful. Hello, friends. Today I'm welcoming Ksandra Roehr to the Free Human podcast. She is a Shamanic Tantrica and Medicine Woman who holds sacred space for individuals to embark on a journey of remembrance of who they truly are and how to thrive in life from this truth. Through inner child healing, shadow work, intuitive coaching, plant spirit ceremonies, and a variety of other shamanic and tantric tools, she curates transformative containers and ceremonies to support the process of self-healing and discovery. Ksandra is also my friend, and I've had the pleasure of receiving her beautiful medicine and individual and group experiences, as well as hosting a group container and retreat with her. She is magic. Enjoy this deep dive into all things inner child. My intention for this episode is that you get a better idea of the depth, variety, possibilities, and necessity of getting to know your inner child parts. Enjoy. Welcome to Free Human. I'm super happy that you're here today, friend. And today we're going to talk about all things inner child. And before you introduce yourself, I just wanted to have us both speak into whether we can feel an inner child part present right now.
Sounds good. Yeah.
And for sure, mine is every single time I hit record on a podcast, because my core wound is around speaking. I can feel her every time. Mm-hmm. And I always feel like this dizziness in my head. Mm-hmm. And so I think it'd be nice. I'm just going to take like 1 or 2 breaths. And what I've learned is that I can breathe her down and then I can arrive in my heart. But she's like really up in her head. And she's worried if I'm going to like remember what to say or make an error or, like all those things.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm going to take like a breath or 2. And then I am able to arrive right here. And I remember that, like, it's such an honor to talk to you and be friends with you and to play. We're playing today. It's like inner child, like my inner child dressed me. Children don't make errors. They're just playing.
Yeah.
Right? And then I remember that I can relax fully.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am so curious. Do you have an inner child part present?
I do. Thank you so much for setting up the space for the permission and invitation to first talk about this. Yeah, I feel that sometimes when we want to have beautiful conversations or deep conversations, or we want to do something new or exciting or challenging, that when we do just pause for a moment and acknowledge the parts of us that are present, it does allow us to arrive so much more to the present moment without the overbearing weight of the charges and the stories and the confusion, right? And those things may still exist, but they exist in a way, into a level that still, like you said, allows us to be more present in the moment, which then allows this organic healing, right? So thank you for the permission of starting this way. For myself, I feel two inner parts. The first right now is a core wound that I'm also working on, that has been present now for many years, but I think very strongly present the last few months. And it's the part of me that feels that I'm always wrong, right? That I'm going to be the mistake, that I'm going to be the mistake, or I'm going to make a mistake. That anxiousness of like, what if I don't get it perfect? Or what if I say the wrong thing? Like that part of me. That she's always present. And same thing like you do. I've noticed that a great thing to do is, for me, closing my eyes is a very big and easy way to drop into my body. It's kind of a way to help me quiet the external stimulation and the external world just for a moment, and then to breathe and go into my heart. And I like to take a moment and just acknowledge that she's here, right? And give her permission to be here, and ask her, what in this moment do you need to feel safe to be present? And you're right. A lot of the times it's just a reminder that she gets to be here, that she's not doing anything wrong, that even if she did something wrong, we're just having fun. We're just, talking with a friend. Or even if it was more of a formal setting, we were invited, right? We were invited to bring ourselves. Like we wouldn't have been invited if all of us wasn't welcomed, And so it's a quick the conversations is usually really quick, but it's just like an internal dialogue where I'm soothing her and I'm validating her, and I'm giving her permission to be here, and then just asking what in this moment she needs to relax so that I can be more present. The second part that's present is, we can talk about this more, but it's a new thing for me, where I recently was able to shift programming and what I call like a protector part, a part that helps that inner part of ourselves, to stay safe or to act a certain way or to live or carry a certain charge. And the protector part is literally on vacation right now. And so it's like this baby fresh chick, like just came out of the shell, and it's a part of me. I'm 43 now, and this part of me is 7 years old. So I have not felt her so rawly in her emotions, right? In her charge and her space for all these years. And now that the protector part is gone, she's like looking at me and I'm looking at her, and I'm like, whoa, like this is really cool. And I get to like have full access to you now. And I also feel like, oh my God, I'm a new mom, and what am I supposed to do with this baby? So I'm coming with all of that to this conversation today. And in that space, again, it's the internal conversation is to myself as the adult, right? Is telling myself that this part of me wouldn't have come up if I wasn't ready and was fully resourced and had all the things that I needed in order to integrate this precious gift. you know. I mean, I know it's a saying, and a lot of people really don't like the saying sometimes, but it's like, we are only given what we can actually, you know, process and hold, like, you know, what we can work through. And it is very true. We really are. Those parts of ourselves we wouldn't be able to access them to that extent or to that level if we didn't have the resources. Like, there's a whole journey to get into inner child healing, and it just would not have been possible for me to get to the place I am now with her if I didn't even have the resources, you know, to integrate her. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
the two inner children that are present. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And okay, so I thought it'd be nice for you, like, first off, I would love for you to just introduce yourself.
Okay.
Like, who are you? And then we'll go deeper into like what inner child healing is.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Ksandra Roehr, and I like to refer to myself as a Shamanic Tantrica and Medicine Woman. I basically pull a lot of different tools from shamanism, tantra, intuitive coaching, plant spirits, both the energetic spirit of a plant and the physical component of a plant. And I weave these things into my sessions, into my containers with individuals. And everything is very curated based on the journey of the individual, right? And there's this beautiful blend of a masculine and feminine energies. So there's structure in the way in which I hold space, I hold ceremony, I hold a container, but there's this beautiful feminine fluidity that really molds and moves based on the person's journey and what they need to cultivate a relationship with themselves and really start to activate the remembrance of who they are, right? That remembrance of empowerment that we have inner wisdom, right? So I use all these different components and methodologies and strategies, and then I weave it, because I'm a weaver, I weave that in to what the person needs along their journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I have had the pleasure of doing inner child healing with you in multiple contexts and styles and all of that. And out of all the people I've ever met, like, your depth of space holding and medicine when it comes to inner child work, I've just never seen anything more beautiful. It's your depth of as a practitioner is incredible. And truly, like, understanding that you are a weaver and what that actually means, because there's not just like one way to do inner child healing.
Yeah, that is very true. It's so true. And there's also not only one way to perceive inner child or to label or to categorize. You know, there's so many different ways, just like there's so many different modalities out there, right? It's finding that right avenue and that right path that for the individual, something's going to click and be like, oh, I can relate to that, right? I can go down that path and that terminology and that journey to access the same end goal, which is connecting with our inner parts and bringing love and compassion and an opportunity to integrate them into this present moment, right? So we can really thrive in our lives from like this aligned space, and also be able to like show up for ourselves when we go through things, right? Like I had someone once ask me, they're like, yeah, what do I need to do to finally like not get triggered? And I thought that's a great question. You know, I've asked myself that question too. I'm like reading books and listening to podcasts and talking to friends. I'm like, yeah, how do I finally like just stop being triggered? Can I just learn how to do that? And I looked at them with, of course, a lot of compassion and very honestly saying, I'm like, that's never going to happen. That's just not going to happen. And I said, honestly, I also don't think that is what we are meant to do. I think what the journey is in this human experience is to feel and experience and embody the full spectrum of emotion, the full spectrum what as a human we can experience, right? From actually our parts being, being fragmented, and the journey of coming back, like that's part of the human experience, is that the expansion and contraction. And so I feel like really what it is, it's the journey of learning who we are, taking the time to get to know ourselves, and learning what processes of how we can hold energy and emotion, how we can move with it, what we can learn from it, how we can expand from it, instead of this pushing away. I don't want to feel this emotion. I don't want to feel this charge. I don't want to, but there's a beautiful, reason why we experience those things. And I can go into alchemy and all that, but yeah.
I love that. Okay. So I think it would be nice to hear both of our definitions of what our inner child means to us, because like we were saying, it's not exactly the same, and it's not even supposed to be. And I think that it'd be really interesting too for us to kind of discuss the different modalities from the internal family systems parts work perspective to the somatic to the shamanic, because I think we both weave in those three realms. And so I think diving deeper and going even deeper than just the internal family systems parts model and going into that would be really fascinating.
Cool.
So, okay. So just basic for me, my inner child, the definition of my inner child is any part of me that's younger than me, period. So for example, I had you can have a core trauma, you can have a trauma happen at any age. And so I had to do a lot of work for my younger, in my 30s. And that's my inner child. And so I love thinking about it out, because it's not oh, you've turned 18. You're not your inner child anymore.
You're a grown up. You already know how to do this stuff, right?
Yeah. So, and I think that's really can broaden your perspective on what's happening inside yourself. And but I do really like the psychosomatic model, internal family systems parts work, because it's got they call the inner child parts the exiles.
Yeah.
And then they've got their manager parts and their firefighter parts. But that model is really beautiful from a dialoguing perspective.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I don't like calling them exiles. I like saying they're my inner child part.
Because,
so for what it's worth. But anyway, I would love to hear how do you define it and think about it in your world?
Yeah, I would say very similar. I feel that it's any part. I mean, it could even be the part of me from yesterday. If yesterday, for some reason, something came up and I felt like this part of me got, the term I use is fragmented. Basically, it's a part of me that's still in a loop of a story or a charge or something that is not fully present in this moment. So it's kind of this fragmented piece of me. That's what I would call an inner part or an inner child or inner component, right? It could be, for me, it's any piece of me that was from yesterday and beyond, even into other past lives. I've done even a lot of inner child stuff. And I think that there's an overlap with shadow work, with especially the past lives energies. But really for me, it's there's this fragmented part of ourselves that is stuck in a loop of a trauma or a story, or it's running on a program, and that part is just looping and looping and looping. And what's fascinating about that is that it can exist whether we're consciously aware of it or not. That looping, that program, that trauma can be running at a subconscious level. And so I, in this present moment, can be showing up to this podcast, be okay, yeah, I've done these before. I know what I want to talk about. I'm good. And then the camera goes on and I'm a deer in the headlights. I was whoa. And it's my brain, my adult brain, my logical brain is why are you feeling that? That doesn't make any sense. You've done this before. Why did that, we go into those things. And the part is that's kind of like sometimes an indicator of like, oh, I wonder if there's an underlying program. And so sometimes when we're not aware of that, that's where we get really frustrated with ourselves, and we have all these expectations because it's like we're not aware that there's all these other little pieces of us that have been fragmented out, or that they're running on certain programs, and those pieces show up whether we are conscious of them or not. And they show up whether we want them to or not. You know, they're a part of us, right? We're still carrying them along. So yeah, for me, that's how I would categorize and how I view, just our inner parts, our inner child, or even sometimes I call them our shadow aspects. You know, I think with internal family systems, like a shadow aspect for me would be considered like a protector part or like a manager. You know, it's this other kind of persona, another component that has been created to help this inner child part stay safe, stay protected, stay hidden, or to continue running on a program. So yeah, I think it's multifaceted within the system itself too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is what I want to kind of dive into next. We've kind of got the internal family systems parts work. There's like the somatic component to it and the shamanic. So
yeah,
I don't know exactly what makes sense, but I would love to paint some sort of picture about what a session actually looks like with all those layers in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if you have a story or you want me to ask you questions.
I mean, I can share like my own personal journey and how I ended up weaving all those things together. Because what's really interesting is a few years ago, you know, my higher self and my guides came to me and they were like, hey, you're going to learn in this next year, you're going to learn shamanism, tantra, and plant medicine. And I was like, those are three very big separate things, right? I was like, that's a lot. And they're like, no, you got it. And you're going to learn how to weave them all together. And I was like, first of all, I had at that point never heard of Tantra, didn't even know what that word meant. Had heard some friends talk about plant medicine, but hadn't yet been fully like drawn to do it myself. And then shamanism, I had a huge charge around that because I didn't have the honor or the privilege to grow up with my ancestors. You know, because of just history of my family, I don't have access to my elders, right? And so I was like, I can't go down the shamanic path. That's not ethical. That's not right. That's not going to be done in the proper way, right? So a few years ago, it was like, hey, all these three things, and you're going to learn them within the next year. And I was like, okay, here we go. And so little by little, I started learning each little one. So like the shamanism, it was all about the journey of like letting go of like imposter syndrome and the need for external validation and authority. Like that journey of like embodying that there was a lot of shadow and inner child stuff that was in there of learning that, right? And then with Tantra, you know, at the time I was going through a painful, emotionally painful changes in my life, you know, in relationship and business and where I was living. And I very intuitively started, you know, interacting with that energy. And then at the end of the year, I eventually was guided to sit with, grandmother Aya for the first time. And I sat with her for five sessions, right? And so that whole experience, kind of like what it led me to realize is the importance of really having like this holistic approach and like this really wide spectrum of like being open to, there's all these parts of ourselves and they're all over the place. And so when we allow ourselves to be open to what wants to come in, what happens is this organic, beautiful container and process where we can approach all of these things in a very effective and deep way. I think what was happening for me, at least, was I was getting too distracted or too comfortable or too activated in the inner part. So even though I knew that there was parts of me that I wanted to change, I was conscious of them and I wanted to love them and I wanted to integrate them. I was really struggling because I felt like it needed to just be done in this one way, or I didn't feel like I had the resources, right, to address them. And so in that process, what I discovered, and what I like to call having the balance of the masculine and feminine energies, and all that really means for me is a masculine approach is the approach to the mind, right? It's something that's cognitive. It's a logical approach. I think internal family systems provides that because it helps you to kind of bring some understanding and labeling and categorizing, which again can be a slippery slope, right? But it helps us to bring this cognitive, logical understanding to why in certain situations or in certain relationships and connections, we tend to have these energies or this feeling that we can't control ourselves or we can't change it, right? So it provides this very masculine cognitive thing. And there's a lot of modalities out there that I feel are very helpful to help us discharge, to clear the charges on a very cognitive level, what's going on. So logically, we're like breaking that down. But the thing with that, because everything it needs to be in balance, is that it can create a slippery slope of getting too much in our heads, of pathologizing something too much, right? Of like all of a sudden, all we see ourselves as are as these labels, which are beautiful because they're great to know. It helps us bring clarity to what maybe we don't know, but we can over attach to the labels and then literally like go to a party and be like, oh, so hi, my name is so-and-so, and I am we go into like all these labels, right? And so that can really create a slippery slope where then we get stuck just in another program and in another loop, right? So then Tantra comes in, or the idea of somatic practices or embodiment practices come in, which is the feminine, which is, okay, now we're taking something from the mind and we're bringing it down into the body. And there's an understanding that our emotional body and our physical body are intertwined, right? There's a beautiful book out there called Body Keeps the Score. There's a lot of modalities and theologies out there that really have proven how our emotions, our body carries the result of unprocessed emotions, right? And that there's a lot of dis-ease and discomfort that we have in our body. And there's even the belief that when we have a physical illness, not all, but some, that it's literally the last thing that finally shows up. It's like the last call for help, cry out for help, that our emotional body is trying to get our attention, right? So now when we have this cognitive understanding and we figured out different modalities of understanding, okay, here's the tapestry, right? Here are the different threads that are creating this tapestry of my life and how I perceive and interact and respond or react to the world, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to know. And I can kind of like start to like unravel cognitively what some of those things are. The next piece I believe is important is now bringing that into the body, because where the program is sitting, where it's living is actually inside of our body. So when we go into embodiment practices, we're able to really go to the root of where something is, right? And so the idea of processing something in our mind is a beautiful computer, and it's just going to like keep looping the same programs over and over again. But the programmer is our body, right? Where the program came from is in our body. And so when we go down into the programmer and from the body, we let the body share the story, right? We let the body have the experience again. And in Tantra and in somatic, there are pillars, and the pillars are like breath, movement, and sound. And so we're using these very organic, primitive ways, right, of moving things throughout our body, right? So it's not so much with words, although that sometimes can happen, but it's more this visceral release, and shaking off or emoting or moving. And it's like, it creates another opportunity for more unraveling. And what I've discovered personally in working with individuals is that when the unraveling and the storytelling comes from our body, it also reveals the solution, right? What is needed in order to bring in a new program or an opportunity for finally get, the safety that we needed or the guidance that we needed, right? Or the insight. Like the body is not only keeping the score of the trauma, it's also holding the treasure. It's holding the solution, right? Because our bodies are wise, and they're not just here to, be like for us to just feel pain, it actually also has the information of what is needed to release that pain. And so that's why it's saying, hey, come pay attention to this part of you right here, right? I need you to move this so I can also help you bring relief, right? So with the embodiment or the feminine approach, to that, I feel that now we have a balance, because now we're balancing mind and body, right? So now the third component would be the soul. So we have mind, body, and now soul, right? And with the plant spirits, now I don't feel like you have to actually consume the physical plant. I feel that we can connect to the energy and the spirit of the plant and still have some really profound experiences. Like one of my favorite things that I started with was cacao, like grandmother cacao, ceremonial cacao, and creating rituals where I'm like taking the time to connect and feel the sensitivity of what that energy feels like moving in my body, right? Even with the Kundalini, which is more Tantra, but Kundalini allows like that bridge over into what would be, an experience like plant medicine. When we connect to our Kundalini energies, our own internal energy and life force, and that can take us on a journey that feels very much like a plant medicine journey would feel like, right? And so what that journey allows is now a connection to our soul, to our spirit, right? Now we're addressing our spiritual soul energetic body, which is also another component of us, right? And in that realm, it's just another path, it's another insight, it's another understanding of just another component of ourselves. Because just like we do in our mind or in our body, we can be carrying charges on our energetic body, right? We can be carrying ancestral charges. We can be carrying past lifetime, we can, karma and all these terminologies, which again, I think are great to know and are great to help us bring some clarity. But I definitely don't like to attach to it and be like, because that's going to just, one of my first mentors used to say, that's just white noise. Don't get distracted by the white noise. It's just about learning and hearing and understanding just enough so that we can continue on the journey of cultivating a deep relationship with ourselves. So with the plant medicine and the journey and connecting in that way ceremonially, it allows us to have access to the soul and what soul fragmented parts, exist, or what we're carrying at the soul level. It allows us also to have the wisdom and access to that guidance that comes from that, divine extended dharmic being, right? That is also another great resource to have. It's a part of who we are. So like, that's how I like to weave all three things, because we're not just the mind, we're just not the body, and we're not just the soul. We are the trilogy of all these three things combined together. And so when we learn a little bit about shamanism, when we learn a little bit about like things like parts work, or there's other more like mental, like even traditional therapy it's a great way. There are a lot of modalities, like there's a lot of approaches that really help, with the mind, the programming of the mind. When we lean into like somatic therapy or Tantra or other embodiment practices where we're now dropping into the body and helping address that part. And then when we have connections with like our Kundalini and plant spirits and medicines, or just sitting together in nature, right? We can sit together with a tree. That can be a plant medicine journey right there, is connecting to a tree and feeling its energy and its wisdom come through you to help you gain access to your soul component, your spirit component in those ways. Then we really have cultivated a deep relationship with ourselves. Then we have full access to the tapestry of all the different inner parts or programs or things that we might be able to carry. And we're able to really get a deep guidance from ourselves of like what is needed and what we desire, so we can start weaving a different tapestry of our lives. So that's how I eventually got to combine all three. And yeah, about a year or so later, I finally clicked. I was like, because I went through it, I went through it myself, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's not that hard, to weave these three things together. But it is a lot. It's a lot, and I think it can be very overwhelming of where to start. But I think it's just with intention. It's knowing that, recognizing like, yeah, there's these parts of us that sometimes need our attention, and we can just take a breath, kind of like we did in the beginning. We take a breath, we come into our hearts, we ask what is present, we ask what is needed, and like little by little, we eventually organically get guided to those approaches and modalities. And we create, what I like to say is like, we create our own medicine, cultivate our own medicine wheel, you know, for our journey of inner child healing.
Yeah. Thank you for going through all of that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I kind of think it might be interesting to somehow either storytell or just explain the different like levels of inner child healing. So for example, and of course we're both, you know, practitioners, so our path, you know, is like oriented towards that. Like if we were meant to do this work. So
yeah,
as we've dived into it, like I do inner child healing, it's like a integrated part of my everyday life.
Yeah.
To put it that way, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
for someone that's just starting, for example, they might be starting at the like introspection level through like journaling, for example. Mm-hmm. Like that can be like a really good place to start. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to begin to do sessions, for example, and you're doing like a parts session, mm-hmm. it mm-hmm. can be, I kind of want to explain like what can happen within the body so people can sense like it could be really subtle and still be really deep, or it can be really intense too. Yeah. And so kind of like going on both ends of the spectrum. And so for example, like doing a part session where I pulled up an inner child part and I pulled up like a happy version of my inner mm-hmm. child, right? Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. and I remember thinking like, oh no, did I do it wrong? Right?
Yeah.
No, so that inner child part that was really happy like gave me a message, and then what I was accessing that day was like my essence, and then she like showed me like who I'm actually supposed to be right now, which is also who she was. Yeah. And that it's about merging those things.
Exactly.
So it was, I mean, I had ecstatic joy during that session, right? Yeah. And it was all just like, I was just speaking, I was dialoguing back and forth with the practitioner, right?
Yeah.
And so that would be like the most joyous, lightest, but it was so deep that I didn't cry or my body didn't move, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that that's what's really important about knowing about like inner child work or like shadow work, right? I think a lot of times, and I'm very guilty of this too. When I first started the journey, I was like, oh, I have to go and look for the parts of me that experience trauma, right? I have to like look for the parts of me that, you know, are like, internal family systems calls it like exiled, right? The parts of me that you hear shadow and you think, oh, the parts of me that were not welcomed, right? And in the journey, what I've discovered is like, I remember the first time I was doing an inner child healing session on myself, and really all that is like sitting down and like consciously connecting, like making room to connect with this part of myself. And I kind of was like the visual was like I was going through this cave and this tunnel, and everything was like really dark, and like there were all these gates that I had to like open and break in. And in the whole time I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, like what shadow, deep, evil part of myself did I had to hide behind like all these walls and all these gates and all this, like there's like a dragon, like the feeling of like dragon energy around it. And I finally get to it and I open the door and it's like this little part that's just like so bright. It was just smiling and looking at me with like this happy face. And I was really confused. I was like, wait a second. What's going on here? Like, this doesn't make any sense. This part is not crying or, evil or overwhelming. And then it dawned on me. I was like, oh my God, what we also do sometimes is that we keep hidden protected parts of our, like innocent essence, pure little parts of ourselves, is we bury those. And so for me, like what it changed my perspective a little bit about what shadow work is And it's really the parts of ourselves that we push away into the darkness, not just because it's something that we judge as evil or wrong or anything like that, but there was parts of us somewhere along the journey of our lives where these pure, innocent essence components of ourselves were not welcomed in the environment, or we didn't feel they were safe or they were accepted in the environment, or that they weren't, like they just weren't, like I'm hearing even the word needed, which I don't know why I'm hearing that word, but that's coming in. And so in those moments, it's like we feel too vulnerable and exposed. And if we don't have, our own understanding or someone in the community or in our family that can encourage the continuous, invitation to share those parts, we will hide those parts. We will put them into the darkness, right? Or we can even convince ourselves, like that part of me is not safe, right? Because we're running on another program because of a trauma that's going on, right? Like a great one that's coming up right now is like, I just recently, several months ago, for about a year, had a relationship that was very challenging for me, right? And it created opportunities and experiences of showing up in a different way than I usually am. And so when something like that happens, I could have, and a lot of us do, and I did to some extent, we can take our open heart, our empathetic self, right? We can take this component of ourselves that can be understanding and forgiving and unconditionally loving. And all of a sudden we can judge that, I just had this really challenging experience in my relationship. This part of me is not safe, or this part of me is weak, right? Oh, this part of me, like, I don't understand this part of me. It's not like, I don't feel comfortable, right? And so I could have taken that part of myself, that essence part of myself, and then walled up, right? I could have built walls around it, and I could have built a cage, and I could have like buried it deep into a cave, right? So like inner child healing and shadow work it's also realizing that there's going to be these very pure, innocent parts of ourselves. And so when we go on a journey and we find those parts, sometimes the discovery, like this part of me, I felt so happy. Like I was crying. And I also felt like so much guilt and shame of like, I'm so sorry I kept you hidden. I'm so sorry I've ignored you. And this part of me was just smiling. Like it wasn't carrying a charge. It wasn't upset at me. It's like no time had passed. She was just so excited that I had finally come home to her, and that now she could reintegrate back into me, right? That I could be that type of person again, that I could feel safe to share that part of myself with the world, and to be able to learn how to make decisions and grow in my friendships and my relationships and my business, right? So yeah, I find it fascinating and that's why I feel it's so important to like know a few different approaches, because it's not just parts of ourselves that are traumatized. There's parts of ourselves in there that we need in order to live our dharmic path, right? That we need in order to learn how to thrive in life more, again, to remember how to be soft, to remember how to be playful and joyful, to remember what it feels like to feel joy in every single cell of our body, right? And so that was another surprising thing for me along the path, is because I thought, it's going to be treacherous and hard and always crying and always anxious, and it is hard. It is a lot of that, but it's also finding these pure essence part of ourselves as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and knowing you, like I have really seen the outward manifestation of your inner child work, because your ability to be present and to like enjoy your sensory experience as a human is particularly high.
Yeah.
To the point where it's inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
Right?
Thank you.
And that's like, that is a testament to that work.
Yeah. So it's not just, I've healed parts of myself that were traumatized. It's also, I've discovered these softer, lighter, like these other components on that spectrum of emotions. I've discovered them, and now I've let them reintegrate into me to help me remember how to also find pleasure and joy and ecstasy in all of those things, you know? I mean, I've had it myself, and I've heard from other people. How many times has someone said that they can't give themselves permission to be happy or to be hopeful because we have this program that the other shoe might drop, right? And so not only do we hold on to trauma in the sense of like, I'm carrying the charge of abandonment and isolation and bullying. Like it's not only that, it's also, I'm going to wall up my happiness and my joy and my optimism. I'm going to like hide these other, what I'm judging as this pure innocent, no, I can't feel these things, because if I do, I'll be vulnerable and exposed, and I'll be weak, and, you know, I'll be susceptible, you know? And I really do believe that in our vulnerability is where we really remember our empowerment and our strength. And it's really, really hard. I think that sometimes it's harder to work with those parts and allow those parts to come to the surface. Yeah, I mean, I was doing a parts work session on myself, and I had a really strong protector part, and she just did not want to let go because she was so determined that she was going to keep this innocent, unconditionally loving being, essence of myself, protected. She goes, it's not safe for you to love that much in this world. It's not safe. And so that protector part, right, that programming, that it was like, no, we are not letting her out. It is not safe for her to come out. She's going to be taken advantage of it, and she's going to be stepped on again. And so I feel that sometimes it could be not just as challenging, but sometimes more challenging to allow those parts to be freed again, because it is so much easier, and because we are really not taught how to create safety within ourselves, right? To create set healthy boundaries and communicate in a way that's, you know, going to be received, or that's more conscious. We're not taught those things. So we're not taught how to integrate and actually live from vulnerability, you know, but it is encouraged, and we are taught how to live from the vibrations of like anger and resentment and revenge and apathy and depression. Like, for some reason, we are taught more that doing those things are a little bit more acceptable or even safer, even though they're completely depleting us, you know? So yeah, those are some other fascinating things that I have really found on my journey, you know, with that.
Yeah. So, okay. So what would be really cool is to explain, and we might have differing perspectives on this, but it's like, okay, so when we're doing this work, the thing is that we're dropping into our higher self.
Yep.
Right. And so when we go to access that protector has a set of behaviors, and they can be called maladaptive behaviors, and that they're protecting us. But those things, how they show up in our life is kind of like, they're dysfunctional in the sense of like, they could be so many different things, but it's the parts of you that, for example, like, okay, so one of my protector parts is like, will go around and like do tasks to try to like protect myself from feeling, for example, right? Like it's like the busying part or something. And that's like protecting an inner child part. So that feeling of being busy is like, that energy is kind of like, nobody's been like, I love it when I feel that hyper busy feeling, like, you know, so that's like that maladaptive behavior. So when you get to know this protector part, it opens up to you. You form a relationship with it. And through that, you're able to see that the behaviors that are maladaptive are rooted in fear. And so that's like, there's an egoic component to it. And then over time, by building that relationship, you're able to have the root system of this part be rooted in love. And then the behaviors shift, and they can be in service to soul instead of ego. And so there's kind of like that layer. And then when you get to the like exile behind it, or the inner child, it's like our higher self. I almost think about it like the divine mother, the divine father too, like energy, like, because it's like this stability inside of us, this centeredness inside of us, is able to reparent and provide what this inner child part
Correct.
needs.
Yep.
And so through that process, then you're like in that, and it can be different because, like we were saying, some of them are just like bright lights, and then others are super wounded. So it's like the first step we're doing is like we've made contact, which is to witness.
Correct.
And then from there, it's like we're connecting. There's like we're seeing what this inner child part needs, and that could vary from needing to speak, needing physical touch, needing to express in some way, right?
Yep.
And then
validation. A lot of times is also just validation that it has permission to exist and to feel what it's feeling in that moment.
Yes. And then there's like the unburdening, which is like in that case, if it's a wounded child, it's like the unburdening is to allow the charge. Now, whether it's like we're doing it in active imagination, realm, right? Like we can have our eyes shut. We're visualizing this inner child giving us the pain, and we're transmuting it back to the earth, right? Yeah. Giving it to the light, whatever. Or like you were saying, like there could be cases where the child like actually doesn't have pain to transmute, right? So that's different. But then there's the integration, the reintegration, which is like to say you have a place in here. Like I see you, I love you, I'm always here for you, I'm going to build a relationship with you. And then from that place of building a relationship, it's really fascinating because that is so technically this is where like time like is not linear. So like when you begin to build this relationship with this inner child part, like it's present now. What does that mean? And if it released the burden, it actually can develop new gifts. It has like it can become older, it can become a new being, and then that actually is part of your being now.
And also, so this idea of like time is not linear, it's circular, right? And so within that, I like how it makes sense to me. It's like, there's a part of us that's still looping. And so since there is no past or future, there's only present, that part of us in this real time right now is still experiencing either the charge or the trauma or the being hidden away. So not the integration, right? So there's this fragmentation, but we're experiencing in this moment right now, which is why, things like, you show up to an event and all of a sudden you're like, why am I feeling this way out of nowhere, right? Because that part of us in this real time is experiencing that charge, right? I'm going to call it a charge for the simplicity of it. So when we release it, it gets released in all of time, and it gets integrated into now. So it's affecting the past, present, and future. It's like affecting all timelines, right? And I mean, I can go into this really cool story too of like a past life inner child regression healing, where like someone in this moment in time had an accident, and the accident was also connected to an inner part of themselves that had a similar accident in a past life. And because in this lifetime they had the accident and they were able to move through it and integrate some fragmented parts and like heal with it, what happened was the past life version of themselves came in and it changed the course of history for them. So in that lifetime, they were no longer able to go back to their family and like live out the rest of their lives. But because in this lifetime, the person went through some shadow work and through some inner child healing as a result or like inspiration from the accident, and so was able to like respond differently to what happened in this moment, it literally created a new timeline for that past lifetime self, where they were able to now live out their life and go back to their family. I mean, it can go as like far as that, right? But like what you were saying is like, I love to approach my inner child work I love to like personify them. I love to give them names. There's this way that it helps me be able to take it a little bit more outside of myself, especially the protector parts or the programs, because those parts are not, how do I want to say it? It feels like to me, at least so far in my personal journey, is that the protector parts or the programs that the protector parts are running at are not really a full essence of who we really are, right? So I'll give you an example. So recently I had a protector part that I discovered, and we named her Patty. Her full name is actually Pouty Patty, and so that's her full name. And it's just this part of myself that has been showing up like if something doesn't go my way, or if I feel embarrassed, or I don't have the ability, or feel that I don't have the ability to communicate my needs, or I don't communicate my needs, and then I don't get my needs met, and then I get pouty because my needs didn't get met, and I put this expectation on my family, friends, or partner, and now I'm upset that you didn't do what I needed you to do, but I never told you what I needed you to do. Or I ask for something and I'm not able to receive it, right? It's like this poutiness of like, well, I asked for it. I told you what I needed. And so this expectation that therefore I should get what I want, right? And so I started like, ooh, this is the part that I really need to like look at, right? It's affecting, it is influencing and affecting my life in many different ways. And as I started the journey of like just calling her Patty allows me to now have a conversation with her, right? It helps me a little bit to take it out of me. And now I can approach it, because one of the things I know that I'm good at is I'm really good at holding space for my friends. And for a long time, I was really good at holding space for others, but really struggled to hold space for myself, right? And so by giving them names, it's like this friend that I'm now showing up for, right? That I can now have an ease. And it helped me be able to more like it's able to communicate with them and work through that, right? So it's training that muscle, but showing up for myself. And so then in talking more about Patty, I came to realize that she is actually not my inner part. She is a protector part of the inner part that's actually still in a trauma, which was fascinating to me, because I thought Patty was it. I'm like, oh, Patty's the thing that, I need to get to know her and understand her and, heal her and integrate her. And then Patty's like, nah, you called me in. I was like, what are you talking about? She goes, I'm not you. I'm protecting you. And I was like, oh, what part of me are you? Like, it was so integrated in me that even then I could not discern that that's like there was a whole other layer of protector part, and this whole other layer like so deeply rooted, right? And so by personifying her, but kind of like separating a little bit of like not identifying like, oh, I'm Patty, but no, instead like, or I'm this way, but instead of like, no, this is Patty. This is an energy that I carry, that I react in life with, right? And in talking to her, I just started asking her questions of like, when did I call you in? Why did I call you in? What are your strengths? What do you feel are your perceived roles? Why do you play those roles? If you didn't have to play those roles, what would you want to do? And so it's like, and then also like, do you have the willingness to allow that part of me to be revealed to me and to, like you said, grow up and integrate? And because what has also happened is, it was a 7-year-old version of myself. In the last 30 some years, I have grown a lot. I've done a lot of work. I've had more life experiences where, that has reflected to me that it is safe for that part of me to come out, that I do have resources, right? That I do know how to hold that part. But because that part is still in that loop, it doesn't have access to the stuff that we've learned and experienced and integrated over the years, because we have this part that's like, nope, you can't have access to it, right? And so in that dialoguing, this inner part was basically like, I kind of would like to go on vacation. I was like, oh, okay, you can go on vacation. That'd be cool. I'm like, where do you want to go? And she wanted to go to the beach. And she's actually playing with my etherical daughter right now. They're off on the beach having a great time. And so all of a sudden I look at this piece and I'm like, oh my God, like it literally is like a brand new baby. Right. And I think the other thing that's happening that I didn't expect is that all of a sudden I was starting to feel for a few days the sense of loss, the sense of like over tenderness, like the sense of really exposed. Right. So even though it's like this beautiful little piece of me that I want to bring it back, and I was going through a lot of emotions of like overwhelmed, right? And the thoughts of like, can I really handle this? Am I really equipped for this? Like, you know, what am I going to do now? Like because I've been so dependent and so overly identifying with these components of Patty. Like, this is how I show up to the world, right? This is how I, you know, present myself to the world. And it's this facade, right? It's this face, right? It's these learned behaviors and programs that are just not sustainable. We're not judging them, but they're just not going to be sustainable. Like, anger is a great emotion. Anger really can help us like go higher up in the emotional spectrum or really bring us down. You know, it's like a catalyst in either way. And so me getting angry sometimes can be really powerful, and it can be really empowering. It can really help me get out of certain things. But to always constantly show up with anger and poutiness and all of that all the time is not going to be sustainable, right? It's not integrated. It's coming from a wounded space, right? And so now what I get to learn is like I've been overly identifying with that. So now that that's gone, I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? And so that's where then the internal self talk to the adult me and saying, oh, hold on a second. You've actually have grown and you have learned things, right? And you have had opportunities where you have shown up without anger. You have had opportunities where you've been able to express your needs. You've had opportunities where your needs have been met. Like, so it's an opportunity to take that piece and allow it to like grow up and really so it's not just an integration of that piece back into ourselves, is that piece also receiving all the downloads and experiences that we have had over time, right? And that it gets to also integrate all these tools that we are starting to create for it, you know? So I think it's like a mutual integration. It's a mutual coming together that I get to learn from that part. That part gets to learn from mine. And then it's all coming into this present moment. But it also affects the past, because now what's going to happen is like the family and friends that were around me at that time, it's going to energetically shift my dynamic and relationship with them. You know, energetically, those charges, those stories, like they're going to dissolve and in the past. And then when I now come and there's a more highly likelihood that when I talk to my parents or to my brothers or to past friends and family members, I'm able to show up differently with them. You know, I'm able to like now communicate with them and not be on as edge or not be as defensive. So it's like this like simultaneous healing that's happening where the charge in the past is being released. Now in this present moment is affecting my dynamic, which organically is then going to set forth what happens in the future in my ability to communicate and interact with them, you know? So yeah, it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, that was such a beautiful story, and I think it's so helpful for you to go into all of the different like layers and dynamics.
Yeah.
That was really beautiful.
Yay! Okay, yeah, cool.
And so, and you're speaking to something very important, is the point of that when we show up in the present, we have like less triggers and less projections. Yes. And we're like, we have more tools. Our personality is like, it's a weird feeling, because when you've unburdened a part, it can feel like a rebirth of yourself. Yeah. Like what's happened over time is I had a really rapid like unburdening one season, and it was like, then I just went into the world and I was like, I'm way less triggered by the world and people. And like I showed up differently. Like, and then that kept evolving to the point where it's like, I mean, like us is like a space, when you get to the point of like space holding too, like you really get to a point where you're not just not triggered, but like you're deep into archetype work and the medicine work and like what that actually means to hold space. But like before that, it's like you sense how the world feels safer, that people are safer, and that you have like new approaches and new perspectives and new patterns and behaviors and thoughts. And it's like, that's why we do this, so that we can like live in new ways that are like way more peaceful, peaceful, joy, more pleasure, like more aligned, like being more aligned. Feels good. And beyond just feeling good, it's like we're rerouting these like parts in service to our soul, so that we can walk the path of soul. And then so when you really start to feel like solidified on that path, it's like a different way of walking and being and feeling in the world. And it's like, it's really hard to explain, but it's deep fulfillment.
And it's really real. I mean, I think one of the best ways is like, we literally go from survival to thriving. That really is, it's that switch, right? That we're constantly right now in survival mode. And so when we start doing this work and start reintegrating these fragmented pieces, it allows us to shift like the constant, our adrenals, our mind, or everything, it shifts so that it's not primarily in survival mode, but I'm now primarily in my thriving, empowerment, feeling safety within myself. So therefore I feel safe within the world, right? And the other thing that I started noticing is that it also changes our perspective and our relationship with triggers. So I feel that in survivor mode, we're still viewing our triggers as, I definitely had this, is like, we're viewing triggers as like, oh, this is a sign that there's a part of me that's not healed and integrated. And I still feel this way too, right? Like I'm still like, I think I'm on teetering into like this new concept that's coming in right now. So I don't fully have it yet, but it's coming in. But I think that in survival mode, when a trigger happens, because the goal is that never not to be triggered. But I think what happens, the shift, is our perspective and our relationship with the trigger. So if a trigger comes up, it's not a reflection and an indicator like, oh, there's a part of me that's fragmented or a part of me that I need to heal. But it's literally like, it's just this neutral reflection back to me of like giving me information or giving me insight. It becomes more like this neutral thing, versus like, oh, this thing I need to go fix, right? So now I can approach it with a thank you. And I may or may not need to do deeper work, just being the witness and awareness of like, oh, okay, so right now I'm experiencing anger, right? Like right now I'm experiencing anger. In this experience that I have right now, anger is present. And so instead of seeing that like in the survival mode and kind of like transitioning to, in the survival, and kind of transitioning into thriving, I could feel that anger and be like, okay, so what parts of me are still angry? Okay, how do I integrate this? How do I transmute? Like there's this whole processing that's happening. But I think in thriving, it's like, oh, anger is present here. Okay, in this situation, why is anger present? What is the gift it's trying to give me? What is the wisdom it's trying to give me? What is the understanding of why it's present? There's like this subtle shifting that's happening. And this is something that's still very new to me. And that's why I love doing this work, is because, I've been doing this for over 15 years, personally and professionally. And I'm still learning new things. I'm still learning new modalities. And I'm still, my perspective and my relationship with all these parts of me is constantly evolving, and it's beautiful because I can feel and sense of like, oh, I'm evolving out of like survival into thriving. I'm able to move from like 3D to 4D to 5D. Like it's like I'm able to coexist in all these places. I don't know. There's like this expansion that not just happens on a cognitive physical level with other people, but there's this expansion that's happening energetically and at a soul level as well. So it's just multifaceted in that sense.
I love that you're bringing this up because the trigger is a gift. And it is, to me, it also feels very neutral. Now it doesn't always, okay, so if like the trigger like pulls up the part and you just completely lose it, then like, that's where you have to learn grace. But like, if you get triggered and you're seeing like, oh, I can tell I'm being triggered, and then
Correct.
you have like meta awareness about it, then you're able to kind of like see, sometimes in real time,
Yeah.
maybe, you know, and like, so it definitely retrospectively as you start to unpack, like you can see it, but then you'll unpack more of it later.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's the way the universe is communicating with you for the evolution of your soul. And so like any experience that we have, and why we like when we have to interact with other humans, because the things happen for us to evolve. And so depending on who's in your environment, the lessons come through the people that are in your life. And sometimes it can even be trippy when it feels like the person, so have you ever had someone say like, I don't even know why I said this, or I was called to say this to you? It sometimes I think that the universe just pulls language to another person.
Yes.
Like, sorry, I had to use you as like for this, because this lesson needs to come through right now. It's so weird. And so it is like every single time, if you go and trace that, it's like it's just beautiful. And when you kind of like, I think there is like an adjustment period where you have realized that like you never get to escape doing this, like, you know what I mean? So then you're like, you accept the gamut of emotions and experiences, and by accepting that they are going to occur, it makes it like more fun. Like you can kind of have fun with it. Too. Like it's in. You could also complain about it too, like, because
you can complain about it too. That's also completely welcome. You know, all of that is completely welcomed. You know, there's again, it's the totality of the human experience, right? And what's coming up right now is the desire to mention. It's what allows us to have access to alchemy. You know, alchemy, like our emotions, like, they're all ingredients, and very equally important ingredients in being able to be an alchemist in our lives. Being able to identify and see and experience and discern and work with and hold all of those emotions allows you to see the full tapestry, all the threads in your life. And when we're able to plug into those things and hold those things and move with those things and learn with those things, that's when we're able to really become like the weaver in our life or the alchemist in our life. That's when we're able to really have the empowerment of co-creating an experience, because we no longer view anything in the dualistic mindset that this is bad and this is evil and this is lower and this is higher. But we just bring everything to the same plane and be like, oh, okay, I see it. In this experience, I'm learning this wisdom from anger, and I'm learning this wisdom for patience, and I'm learning this wisdom from love, and I'm learning this wisdom for revenge. And as I'm moving that, and not meaning that that's who I'm going to be, but I'm moving that through me, it creates this opportunity for like profound expansion and really experiencing life and living in life, and not being in such a reactive mode in life, but being able to respond and like slow down and be the witness and surrender into the experiences, right? So I think that that's also what it helps us with. It is that space, and then, the energy of Patty is reminding me like, there's a big integration. Like, I really want to come back to this, that there is important to know that there can be a very big integration, or recalibrating. Sometimes I like to use that word, that happens after we have these experiences. Even, it doesn't matter what kind of inner part we find, whether it's a traumatized or an enlightened, right? There's like, kind of like I was saying, like, I'm shifting my relationship with Patty. Patty's on vacation right now. Eventually she is going to dissolve, but I'm on my journey with her right now. And now I feel this exposure, right? And so, and it also, there's a lot of recalibrating. So it's natural and normal to feel like big feels again. Like yesterday I started to have an experience where the reason why I called Patty in, how I was feeling in my brain, how I was feeling in that moment, I viscerally felt again the fullness of that. Like, I was kind of like, whoa, what is happening right now? I'm like, oh my God, I'm finally, for the first time in a very, very long time, feeling again the rawness of that part of myself, and why I called in that protector part, why that protector part got created, right? But that's part of it, right? Is like to feel and to move through it. This is where the body and the embodiment work is beautiful, right? Is like I get to breathe through it. I get to move with it. I get to hold it. I get to cognitively address it, right? So it's like bringing all those holistic approaches. And it also doesn't mean that I'm not going to get angry anymore, or I'm not going to get pouty. You know, like it definitely happened. Like, again, last night, you know, I was like playing a game with my partner, and all of a sudden I was like, ooh, okay, I'm starting to feel some of the characteristics of Patty. I wasn't feeling Patty. It was really interesting. Patty was not here, right? But my beingness was like feeling some of those characteristics, right? And what was great is like, yeah, it allowed me to have more of a cognitive awareness of what's happening. And because I wasn't using a protector part, because I wasn't fully like, here's my protector part, but now like that's gone and I can like respond, it allowed me more space to react. I'm not sorry, not react, but respond, right? Because now I had an awareness of it. I was like, okay, what's the need? Okay, I need a break. I need a little pause. I need a little break. I need to get off the phone. I need to go do some breathing. So it wasn't like this intense, like pushing away of someone or bringing the protector part in so quickly. It allowed an opportunity for that inner part of me to grow, to mature, to evolve, to embody like, oh, I do have tools. I know that I can communicate very clearly right now what I need. I can take ownership that I'm feeling a little off right now. Like it creates space and opportunity to like respond to life versus like react to life in that moment. You know, so yeah, I think it's also important to know, like, yeah, there's still an integration process. There's still recalibration that happens. But yeah, it lessens over time, which is really, really amazing.
Yeah, I love that you're speaking to this because it reminds me. So let's just, because we have like an infinite amount of parts. So one of the things that I have done is to I had years where I was just like kind of doing open-ended parts work. And then over time I was to see like, okay, what are my main parts that show up like that are in service to my dharma, like the soul work I'm doing. And then through knowing those parts really well, and like you were saying, once you kind of begin to work with them and the behaviors are shifting and there's this integration period, and it can be varying in lengths, right?
Yeah.
And the universe will like give you a lesson and be like, want to see if you're going to do those same behaviors again? Let's test it.
Don't worry about whether or not you're going to have enough opportunities to practice. You'll get it. You'll get it, right? Don't worry. You're like, if you're questioning, have I integrated that part? Oh, something will happen to give you a reflection of whether or not you have, you know?
100%. So,
yeah.
Once these parts like have the new behaviors, these behaviors they don't just end there. It's not like oh, these are my behaviors now. Like if you think about the parts as like aspects of yourself, they have like they can learn new habits, skills. Like, and so what happens is when you develop them, they become more mature, they become older, they become like very highly functional if like you can see how you're orienting them towards the work you're doing in the world. And so that's what's so beautiful about them, is because the maladaptive behavior, like you're saying, is like a loop.
Yeah.
And once you've gotten out of that loop, they have new behaviors, but then it doesn't stop there. It's like that, and that's kind of that feeling of interpersonal growth and expansion, and where you're like, you know, some people use the word like you're going to your like highest new timeline, that your highest potential is the kind of like, that is an aspect of that work.
Yeah it totally is. It's there's something interesting that wants to come in to be shared around that, especially like the phrase like the golden timeline or the integrated timeline. One of the other things that I've been experiencing a lot, and so have like friends and clients, it almost feels like there's all this collapsing that's happening of like past lives, parallel lives, ancestral, like there's like this collapsing and integration that's happening of like our soul, like our soul is naturally fragmented. I mean, this is kind of like an understanding I'm getting. It is naturally fragmented, and it's meant to, in order to have like access to different journeys and different experiences and different things that soul part, that soul needs in order to evolve within itself, and then evolve as a consciousness, right? And so what's interesting and kind of, I guess, how it's connected to inner child healing is that there is, at this etherical level, this collapsing and reintegration of those life lessons, of those parts of ourselves, of the ability to reweave and bring together, so that there is this more, I don't know the word, like honed in experience, it can be accessible. And so in a way, like inner child healing is like a small piece of that, right? So through the skills of doing shadow work and inner child healing, of learning how to connect with our different components of ourselves, learning the lessons, being open to the lessons, learning how to like bring in and reintegrate and grow from the wisdom of those parts of us, right? It's like one piece that then allows, it's like this cascading thing that then like allows for like the bigger reintegration of all our soul fragments back into one soul, that then is going to lead into this whole different experience that I don't think as a humanity or conscious collective we really have had access to. Like there's this other thing that's happening that I can kind of have a sense and a feeling for, but I don't have a full understanding. But I can feel how like something as, I mean, I don't want to say inner child healing and shadow work is small. It's not small. It is really, really hard work and very intense. But when you think of like the totality of like the soul experience, it is a component. Let's call it that. It is one component, a component, and it's such a beautiful and important component of that. Yeah, I don't know. That for some reason that was coming in to share something around that. Yeah.
I like that. It's what I like you're speaking to is there's so much unknown that we interact with, that we can sense and feel, and that is outside of language.
Yeah.
But there's so many layers to this journey that are not, like, we can't actually speak through our mouth.
Yeah. we cannot that is so true. That is 100% true. Yeah. And another piece that I guess that's coming up with that is like I kind of lost the thread. Let me see what wants to come back. So there is, and this is my own journey too, but there's a lot of people that I work with that have such a strong desire to connect with like the etherical world, with their psychic senses, with their powers and abilities, even with their higher self, right? And sometimes there's this fear and this resistance, and a lot of times the fear and resistance is either because they don't feel safe, or they're afraid of the unknown, right? Like I've noticed a theme. There's other things, but those are like some of the ones that are coming up, and I've also had this myself. And what I think is what I'm being shown right now is that why inner child healing and shadow work and parts work is so profound is that I feel like the reason that we're afraid of the unknown and don't feel safe is because we don't know ourselves, because we don't have safety within ourselves, right? Like we are just not, and it's okay. This is part of the human experience. A lot of us really don't know and have not been taught how to sit with ourselves. We have forgotten as a culture, as a human race, how to sit with ourselves, to connect with like all these different components, to weave them all together. we have forgotten. So like, we don't know ourselves. And so it's like, there's something there about like, because we don't know ourselves and there, we don't know, can I handle that? Can I not handle that? I don't know. Like, I don't even know what I don't know. And so like, there's this internal fear and uncertainty, and I don't feel safe in myself because I don't know how I'm going to react. I don't know how I'm going to show up. I showed up like that one time, or I showed up like that 5 times. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, that's how I am. That's just how I show up. Right. So because there's this internal unknowingness and there's this internal lack of trust in self and safety, then I think naturally, when we look at the world outside of ourselves, we're going to project out that fear of the unknown, the fear of that, or the idea that I'm constantly unsafe. And that can be both at a physical reality and at an etherical reality, right? And so that's why I think it's so important that where we really start is that cultivating a relationship with all parts of ourselves and creating practices and modalities and grace and all these things to really get to know the unknown within, feel comfortable in the entrusting of the unknown within, because there's still going to be constant unknowns, but to learn how to be able to hold that and be comfortable with knowing that I will probably spend the rest of my life discovering inner parts of myself, but because I've constantly shown up over and over and over again, it's okay. Like, it's okay if there's another part. I know how I practice, I've embodied how to hold that, right? And then I'm creating safety, meaning really what that is I'm trusting in myself. I feel grounded. I feel connected. I trust my intuition. I trust my gut. And of course, I'm overgeneralizing here. There are a lot of scenarios around the world where it really is not physically safe, right? And so I'm not speaking to that. I'm speaking more to like this internal, like, I don't like this overall feeling of I don't feel safe in the world, right? More to that. And so, yeah, that's why I feel it's so important for us to like really dive into like the inner child or shadow work, because until we change that internal environment within ourselves, it doesn't matter what we do externally or what we try to learn about the etherical world. We're going to come up against really hard resistances and really hard blockages, because the external and the energetic can only reflect back to us and we can only vibrate at that frequency that we are within ourselves, right? Like, yes. That's it. That's all you're going to have access to.
And I like how this is a beautiful place to wrap up today, because it's like,
yeah.
Okay, so if you're wanting your gifts to emerge, it's actually, yes, you have to go do this work.
Yes, you do.
You're clearing fear. You're clearing ancestral energy, the energy from the trauma in your body. And when you do that, you come in contact with your stream, your light.
Yeah.
And then more light is you have access to. It's like, then when you have these, you'll naturally have these activating experiences depending on what path you're walking.
Yep.
And then as you expand, what does it do? It takes you back down into the descent to go do more work, and then you ascend, and then so it's like the more you go into this, the more you get to ascend. And so but you can't, if you go try to extend and you don't do the work, I mean, that is spiritual bypassing.
Yes, it is.
There's not a person out there. Of course, we have both experienced that.
Yes.
Because it's a natural process.
Yes.
If you feel like you skipped something, you'll know eventually, and you'll come back and you learn on the path what you did. And
you'll learn why you needed to skip it, because there is a reason why you needed to also skip it, exactly. You know?
Because sometimes we do go out and go, oh, I'm out. And then you're like, okay, I need to go back now. Like, right?
Yeah.
It's like this, so you learn what that is. And of course, like, we have to learn that, I think, like you were saying. And, but this is like the inner child work is the core of your experience of enlightenment, of ascending. This.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it gives you access to the root system. It gives you access to the foundation in which we have built our entire lives, and what will happen sometimes is an entire paradigm collapse and shift. And what I kind of, categorize that is like there will be moments as you're doing this work where like the entire way in which you approach, let's say relationships, for example, will completely collapse. Even the ways that you perceive or we perceive as like healthy and integrated, even those will collapse. It's like starting all over from the foundation. And the reason for that is because let's say that a building is built and then there's like an energy source, right? There's a piping source that's feeding the energy and the water into this building. And if that energy source is coming from an unintegrated part or overprotector parts, right? It's the whole system that sometimes needs an entire collapse. This isn't always going to happen, but I do want to there's really strongly just want to speak to this, that it is possible that when we're doing this work, because it does give you access to the root system, the foundational system, to the system that's feeding, and providing like lighting and water and nourishment, that sometimes it will collapse the whole thing. And we will have to even let go for a while, things that have been working for us. Because what we're looking at is the source that's feeding that, the nutrition that's feeding that, and so that at a very bigger level can also happen when we're doing this work. And that's the profoundness of it, is that it really is going really, really deep. And it really goes into the foundation of wanting to build anything else upon it.
Yes, because you can have multiple parts that are built with this same foundation, and then it's like I just use the term like there's this entire operating system, and it gets pulled out.
Yep.
And we both had that multiple times. And
yep.
It's a pretty big collapse.
Yeah.
And rebuild. But it feels really good post.
It does.
Rebuild.
Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, it's like, oh, that whole thing was built on this fear-based system over here. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is like that rerouting from fear to love at the most fundamental level. That is what we're doing. So.
Yep. Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, this conversation was so fun.
It is so fun.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Of course.
Yeah. We'll have to
Thank you. We definitely will. Thank you.